Okay, welcome to part 3 of shooting the Eagle Nebula in narrowband with the Celestron Edge 9 1/4. Again, this big guy here. So you've been through part 1 and part 2, and in part 3 we're actually going to do the processing, which is something that some people enjoy, some people don't. So we'll be doing that in Photoshop. We'll be using a Deep Sky Stacker first to bring in the images. It's going to be hydrogen alpha, oxygen, and narrowband. So for each filter, we'll have a different tab in Deep Sky Stacker, and we'll pull those together. We'll get a reference frame out of one of those colors, so that when we combine them as color channels in Photoshop, we'll be able to match them and get them to line up and so forth. We'll probably be doing this in the Hubble palette. So the Hubble palette assigns colors to those filters a little bit differently than a regular color palette, so we'll be going through that. I've also got another program called Lightroom. It's also an Adobe program. I prefer kind of sometimes editing back and forth with Lightroom and Adobe, depending on what the tools, or Lightroom and Photoshop, depending on what the tools are in each of those programs. I'm not a big PixInsight fan, just for my own purposes. It's an excellent program, I know. It's a lot more technical behind the scenes and in some of the menus to control the different options that you have there. What I will say is that you do need the tools that are offered in programs like that in order to really get in to astrophotography pictures, because there's a lot more stuff going on in the picture that you really need to control. Things like the noise, some of the colors that are pulled out. There's layers of different colors, not only in the nebula, which is a big thing with processing, but it's also just controlling the levels in different layers so that you can get that appearance that you want. So Photoshop does that, it has a lot of tools for that. So we'll go through some of that. A lot of this I've learned myself, kind of self-taught, so I'm not a professional, but I like Photoshop because of what I do and the way that I work. So it's a little bit different for different people. One of the things I will say is that if you're going to invest all your money in the astronomy equipment and the time to go out and shoot hours and hours on end, it's probably a good idea to take some time to also learn the processing. And you'll see guys that some of them are good at it, some of them have excellent equipment, but they may not be so good in processing. But there's a lot of potential there, and it's kind of a bummer that you don't get that match of. In a lot of cases, there are a lot of really good pictures where people have mastered both, but the processing takes time, and it's a different kind of a personality thing where a lot of people like the outdoors and going out and being out there and shooting and the technical side of it, but when it comes to sitting for hours in front of a computer screen processing, sometimes it doesn't seem as much fun for people. It just depends on you and what you like to do. So anyway, we'll go through that, and that's about it. We'll again, part one, you got an intro to me and the website and all that kind of stuff. That was a long intro. We did the polar alignment there. Part two, after the polar alignment, we jumped right into the plate solving. A little bit about stellarium, PhD2 guiding. We had some issues with the mount. I had to reconfigure software and update the software and so forth right in the middle of the shoot, so we went through a little bit of that. So we had some stumbles, which is realistic. I don't think there's a night that you go out there and everything's exactly the same, so you have to learn to kind of adjust on the fly. So that's what we did in part one and part two. And then we finished up the shoot, and what I did is I cut it short. I didn't want to do all the HA, all the oxygen, all the sulfur and stuff. I'm pretty sure you guys got the idea of what was going on there. So let's go ahead and finish this out by pulling all that stuff into Deep Sky Stacker, stacking it, pulling it into Photoshop, finishing that picture out, and then we'll see what the final image looks like. So that's it. Also, one last thing, I'm really happy you guys came to see this video and found it on YouTube. But I also wanted to give a shout out to some of the other people out there doing the same thing. I learned a lot of what I know by watching videos on YouTube, and I want to kind of contribute back to the community. And I want to give a hats off to Trevor Jones from Astro Backyard, Dylan O'Donnell, some of the stuff that they do, and Chuck's Astrophotography is another one. But there's some other ones, prevalent people that are out there that we all know and see. And if I didn't mention your name, I'm sorry, but we're all helping each other. So again, I just want to contribute to that. And that's it. So let's go ahead and get started, and we'll start pulling those images in and see how it goes and what it looks like. Hello, welcome back. This is John, and this is part three of shooting the Eagle Nebula at 2,350 millimeters through a Celestron Edge HD Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope. And the imaging train on that scope is an ASI 1600 mono camera. We're shooting narrowband. And the guide scope and guide setup that I have is a Celestron off-axis guider and an ASI 174 mini mono guide camera. So in part one, we went through the intro and the equipment and the location, and then we did the polar alignment. And then in part two, we went through the use of some of the software like Stellarium, PhD2 guiding, astrophotography tool, and Deep Sky Stacker. And one of the things we also did was talked a little bit about plate solving. In this video, just like the other ones, I'm not going to get into the details of all the software and the settings and all that kind of stuff. We're just going to do kind of a quick run through of the key parts of taking an image, running it through Deep Sky Stacker, and then pulling it into Photoshop and combining into a full color image. Again, it's a quick tutorial just to give you a real quick, hey, this is how you get from point A to point B in your processing. So right now I've already taken the data from my folders that the frames were stored in from the camera. So what typically happens is your camera will set up a folder, and it'll dump the files into that folder, and then I'll retrieve those files and I'll pull them into my my folders for Nebula in this case. And so here you can see I've got astrophotography, photos, nebula, and I have in the photos folder I have galaxies and planetary and different things like that. And then I'll come to the nebula folder and I'll select the Eagle and then data. So you want to make sure you store your files in a way that you can go retrieve them later on. And then in here I have the darks. So what I've done is out of each of these files or these folders, I've selected all the data files and I've pulled those into Deep Sky Stacker. And then once I get into Deep Sky Stacker, and this is an important thing, you want to make sure you go through each frame, and especially the ones when you get down to the lowest scores. and you want to review what the issues are with these frames, whether it's focus, clouds, whatever the case may be. You can see if I zoom into this one, for instance, I've got oblong stars, and I'm out of focus. If I go to the top image here, I'm looking at the score and the stars, and I zoom into this one, and it's much cleaner. We've got double stars we can make out. We can see the wisps and some of the detail in the in the object. So that's what you're looking for. You want to make sure. And then when I go to the mid range, if I go to like 400, we were looking at one with a score of 900. If I go to 400, and notice this is another night. This is a separate night. My camera was rotated slightly different. That's due to the off-axis guiding and finding guide stars on that particular night. It might be some other issue. But what happens in deep sky stackers, it'll take these different frames at different angles, and it'll stack and align based on the stars, and then you're going to have edges, and we'll see that in Photoshop where this overlaid at different angles, and the core of the frame is okay, but out here you'll have transitions from the stack, and you'll have to either crop those out or process them out, and there's some tricks on how to do that. But anyway, we're reviewing the frames, and we want to make sure as we go through these that we determine what the cutoff point is going to be. So again, I kind of keep zooming in. I'm looking at the wisps, I'm looking at the stars, different details in each of these photos, and when I get to the point where it's less than desirable, here I'm down into 300. I'm still seeing some good detail. I get further down into 200, the top of the 200s. I'm still doing okay. You can just work your way down until you start seeing kind of funky stuff. I'm down to 100 now, and still I'm good. I'm getting okay. It's okay when you're out here, but when you zoom in, you start to see, you get some fuzz, and I've got some guiding issues. I'm starting to get some oblong stars. So you work back up, and you find that cutoff point, and then you get rid of those data files from that point down. And so you select your top scoring data files, and if you notice right here, once they're selected and checked, it'll give you a count. That count's important because when you go to your other data files and you select those, let's say you select the best out of here, let's say the cutoff is at the same point in the 200s that my HA frames were, and I check these. So I've got, we're going to deselect HA because I don't want to mix those into the count. So I know I had 43, and what we're going to do is we're going to deselect these and uncheck them. Whoops, uncheck. And if you noticed in my oxygen channel or my sulfur channel, I had only 14 frames. So I've got 14 frames selected here and 43 in my HA. So I might want to drop my HA down to 14 of the best files. The only other way you can overcome it, and I can't do this now because it's too late in the season to gather more sulfur, is I would stay out there longer and gather more sulfur frames. So ultimately the idea is have about the same representation in terms of number of frames and score for all three images, and then ultimately you'll stack those. The other thing here, so you go through, you select your best images in each group, and then what you want to make sure and do is select a reference frame. And when you select the reference frame, make sure you choose a reference frame in one of your other colors. Typically, you'll use your HA image or your luminosity shot for the main group, and then your RGB or your narrowband, the oxygen and the sulfur, will be in the subgroups here. And those in the subgroups is where you want to pick out that reference file to stack to. So at least that's the way I do it. That's the way I've seen other people do it. Anyway, so you stack each of these, and then once you stack them, you'll end up selecting the save picture to file, and at that point it'll take the image and create a TIFF file. and then you'll store that in a folder to be combined in Photoshop later on. When you do that, it'll give you an option to stretch the image slightly or make adjustments in Deep Sky Stacker before you actually save it to a TIFF file. You can do that if you want, and there's different options to save the embedded adjustments or not. You can either apply them and save it, or you can save it as data in the file and but not make the adjustment and save that for Photoshop. So all right, so now we're going to go to Photoshop. So basically what I've done is I've taken my my saved images out of Deep Sky Stacker, and I've created a channel for each. So this is the O2 here. We have an HA file, and we have a sulfur file. And so I've dragged those into Photoshop, and I have them here already. So there's the HA. Here's the O2, and then here's the sulfur. So these are ready to start working on. And so typically the way that I start is I'll go ahead and I'll start a stretch. And so what I'm really doing is I'm making these presentable. So I want, if they're overexposed or there's a lot of noise or there's some other major issue that I want to correct, I try to do that now before I combine it into the full color image. And so the first thing that we'll do is we'll stretch this. I'm into I was playing around a little bit. Let me flatten this first. Okay, so we'll start out with the unflattened image. This is how they come in. Again, I think this was the sulfur shot or the O2 shot, and then I've got the sulfur shot. This one's already stretched slightly. I can tell already. I'm going to back up out of this and get it back to the beginning of what it was. Let me deselect. And then we're going to back up. Okay. I was playing around again a little bit. Okay, so here's the starting images. And what we're going to do is we're going to, you can do adjustments either in the drop down, or you can actually come over here and do all your adjustments here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to stretch each channel. You do that by basically sliding this over to the data. You can see the data there in the white, all this area. And you can play around with this slider if you want. It does different things, but the main point here is you want to be careful you don't clip your data. Clipping is basically you're coming in here and you're cutting out your data, so you don't want to do that. You want to remove the overexposed part by bringing it in and then leaving it at a whatever suits you in terms of the exposure and gamma and so forth. You can do this. Over here, this will adjust gamma. You can play around with that if you want. But the main thing is just make it presentable. This is where you would do your deep sky noise reduction. You can do that either through the filter, or you can do it through the various tools that you can bring into Photoshop. This is these are digital. I think it's Digital Pro Logic. Creates a suite of astronomy tools that you can download from the internet, and Photoshop will actually access that once you set it up, and you have all these options here. You can use these for different things. You can actually select it, make stars smaller, and then you hit the little play thing down here, or deep sky noise reduction, or space noise reduction, whatever the case is, and you can work on your base images before you actually pull them in and do the combining into the color image. We're not going to do this now because again this is a basic video. So we'll stretch the images. So we did the HA there, and now we're going to go to the O2. We'll do the same thing. We'll do a stretch on this, and we'll bring the slider over without clipping the data. Here you can see the transitions from the stack again. And again, you'll play around with this, and it really takes practice to understand what you're ultimately going to see based on what your early adjustments are here. So we'll go to the sulfur, And one thing I'll note on the sulfur here is that sulfur really picks up these stars, and if I don't do a good stretch on the sulfur image, this will blow up your stars. So keep that in mind. Make sure you and the other thing with the sulfur is it's probably the one frame where you want to do a lot of work on that one before you at this point in the process to make sure that it doesn't kind of overpower the other frames with artifacts like noise and blowing up the stars and things like that. So make sure you control your sulfur frame before you pull it in. So on this one, I'm going to stretch this one quite a bit. I want to really get rid of that overpowering effect of the. Now notice the noise starts coming in here. So on this one, as I reduce it, when I say reduce, I mean the exposure. I really want to remove some of this noise, and so this is where, if you notice here, each of these is in 32-bit mode, and a lot of the editing is limited to 16-bit mode, so we're going to have to convert to 16-bit as well. And so we're going to leave these, and we're going to go through each one, and we're going to convert to 16-bit. I'm going to do that right now with the sulfur channel. So here we go. We just basically select 16-bit. We're going to merge it. That basically flattens the images. It combines the layer, and basically it just combines all the work that you did, and that way you're working on one baseline frame. And then you'll get the when you do the 16-bit, you'll get an option here to do exposure and gamma. That's what you want to select. There are other options here, and for different different ways of processing, but one we want is the exposure and gamma. I'll select that, and then we'll go to the other frames, and we'll basically do the same thing. And so the main point here is just convert to the 16-bit, and that way we'll be able to do the editing using all the various tools that we have. Same thing, exposure and gamma. Once this comes up, we'll select that. And computer's taking a little bit of time today for whatever reason. And we'll go to the HA, and we'll do the same on this guy. 16 bits, merge. You can also use the layer flatten. That does the same thing as merge, so keep that in mind. You'll be flattening as you go through. You'll be flattening all the time. It's just kind of how you when you're using the tools, basically you'll finish using a particular tool, and then you want to lock it into that particular state, and that's when you flatten it. You can back out of flattening by hitting Control Z, and you can back out for quite a bit. So you can if you flatten it, you can get back to what you started with. So that should help you if you need to, for instance, go back and redo a particular channel that you've done some work on. All right, so here we have the HA channel in 16, the oxygen, and the sulfur channel. So we're going to go back to the sulfur channel where we had all that noise, and we're gonna show you one of these tools, astrophotography tools, and we're going to select the space noise reduction. We can do light pollution removal as well, but we're primarily concerned with the noise, so we'll do that real quick. And the nice thing about these tools is it'll run through all the adjustments that you would do yourself manually, and it just does it all automatically. And if you look, it's if you select this little guy right here, it's doing all of this when you hit that play button. It goes through all these routines, so that's kind of what's going on in the background. And if you notice, the noise is better. I can do another one. I can, we can make stars smaller, which is important in your sulfur channel. Again, I'm not going to go through everything here. That's not the point. But sulfur, you definitely want to work that frame before you do the combining. So we'll go ahead and just leave that the way it is. All right, the next thing we want to do is, so we've got the 3 frames. You want to make sure they're clean. You go through all that process to get them as clean as possible and presentable. And then what we're going to do is we're going to combine them, okay, into a color image. So the way I do that is we go to the luminosity channel or the HA channel, and I'm going to copy this and create an RGB canvas from the clipboard. And so the way I do that is Control A, Control C, and then I come up here and I create a new document, and you can see it's selected from the clipboard, RGB, and I leave this stuff alone. It's all set. I create it, and then you end up with a canvas, a new canvas. And if you come down here to channels, you select your channels, and this is where you're going to put your frames for each of the filter colors. Notice you have an RGB channel here, and for this got me hung up for a long time. Basically, when you combine channels, you're going to combine your colors, but you're going to still have all your HA, or your, it's better to talk about this from a luminosity channel perspective. So when you're imaging out there, you're doing LRGB, and most of your really good definition pictures will be in your luminosity channel. But when you go to actually combine them into a color channel, you've only got your red, green, and blue. The luminosity, after you create your full color image, your luminosity, you'll actually stack, or your luminosity frames will be layered on top of the RGB image as a luminosity layer. And I'll run through that in a minute. But right now, the main point is you've got your channels, you've got your red, green, and blue. And so we're going to do a Hubble palette. So the assignments for the color in HA is going to be green, O2 is going to be blue, and sulfur is going to be red. So we've already copied this to the clipboard. We're going to go back to this, and we're going to paste it into the green channel. So you want to make sure the green is selected, and hit Control V, and so there's my HA. I'm going to go to O2. I'm going to hit Control A, Control C on this guy, and we're going to go back to the Untitled there, and we're going to put this into the blue channel. And then we're going to go back and grab our sulfur shot, and we're going to hit Control A, Control C, and then we're going to put that into the red channel right there. Okay, so this is a basic Hubble starting out color image of the nebula. Now notice I've got a lot of green in here. The reason why is because of the 43 frames I was telling you about that are in hydrogen alpha, and then I've only got a few in oxygen and sulfur. So my challenge is going to be, well, how do I balance that out? So obviously I've got green, it's overpowering the image. The first thing I do is I attempt kind of a stretch on this to see what kind of control I have over the colors. So right now we'll go to the layers. You notice I'm starting out with no layers, and I'm going to do an adjustment on this, and I'm just going to see what a simple stretch in the green channel is going to do. And so I'll select green, and I'm going to come down here to the slider, and I'm going to pull this up to the data, and it gets rid of some of the overexposed areas on the outside that are green there. So I'm going to pull this over, and we'll just leave it right there for now. You can mess around it with this. Obviously that'll clip the data, it'll clip most of the green out, and then you can see the strong blues that are in there. So we want to keep that balanced. So we'll come back up to the data there, and we'll kind of leave it there. So that's the first stretch on the image. Okay, this is the image now that we've removed some of the green. So we still have more work to do, a lot more work actually, but just for the basic stuff I want to get in here, and I want to note a couple of things. So notice one of the issues is we have red around the stars. That's from that sulfur channel. So we'll have to get in there and correct that. You can do that with a color select and sliders to basically highlight the red, and you can change the color by either mixing you can use these two tools here, color balance, channel mixer, etc., to make adjustments to these. And the way you isolate these things is by you can do a color select, which will select a particular color range. This one, if you notice, you watch this here, and it'll show you as I select different groups that the computer is seeing as that color in the image, and then it highlights it here. And then what you can do is you can extend out the selection quite a bit, like the whole picture. You can work on the red, or you can just isolate it to the red around the stars right here. And then you can do level adjustments and use these tools again like I showed you. Now, one of the nice things is you can do a color select here, and if you hit OK, you can see it's selected around these stars, right? But if you want to really see the true selection, go ahead and right click and go down to your select and mask. It'll come up here in a second. So there's the selected parts in the image there that are red. Okay, so it selected them there, and we'll get the computer to catch up here, and then we'll go back and we'll use one of the tools to make an adjustment to show you. So there's the selection, and I can go in here, for instance, and I can hit channel mixer or the balance, or I can use the levels. Now, each of these do a slightly different thing, so all I'm going to say is just be careful how you use these, because you can end up with funny looking halos, or you can actually clip the data right around the star, and you'll have like a black ring around the star. So I typically like to use the data in there and change the data to match the background a little bit more. And you know, so I've selected the channel mixer here, and I can change the color of that red to kind of more of a white by using, you know, these sliders. Now again, I didn't select I didn't use the right amount of isolation for that particular color, so I probably should have feathered it out a little bit. And I can go back to the mask. Basically, at this point, I hit Control Z to back up to where I was, and I go back to the select mask, and I can feather this out, and then I don't have quite the crazy transition. It smooths out the transition from the modified area and the unmodified area, so it feathers it. And I'll go ahead and use that feather, and then I'll select the tool that I want to use, and we'll go to like color balance, and I can balance it to more of a blue. And now it's feathered, and you see like there's kind of a green halo around it. And then if I go over here, you're back to the red again. So I'm going to go to kind of match it more to the picture. And then we'll look at kind of a before and after. So if I go heavy on the magenta, it brings it back. So I want to come back to the green and kind of, you know, edit it out that way. And again, I can work a lot more on that if I wanted to make it right. But you can see the before and after. So there's, you know, that's stronger. And I'm holding this guy right down here. If you want to look back and see it without the change, you just may just hold this guy down here. Then I'm going to zoom in and I'll let you see it more this way. So if I hold that down, you can see it's a very slight adjustment. If I hold it down, you can see it's red, and there it was just a slight more green. I can bring this in, and you can see the adjustments that I'm making there, and they're very slight adjustments. Okay, so we'll balance it out there. Sometimes you could work close in on your stars. So again, you can highlight all this pink out of here, and you can modify it and mix it and change you know, the detail around your stars. But it's the color select tool that I wanted to show you there. All right, so this image right here, we have it combined, so I could do the same thing with the color select. And again, these are just quick ways to edit. This time I want to make sure that my layer is flattened. It is. So I want to select this kind of greenish orangish color down here, or maybe a little bit more into the orange. And then again, I can use my slider here to affect just the part of the image. And if I really open it up here, so now you can see that the pillars are right here, and then we've got this guy over here, right? So that's this guy here, and then your pillars here. So the control is, you see the hydrogen alpha here in the orange. I want to limit it to that because I want to change that to more of an intense orange color. And I can do that literally by just pulling the slider back and limiting it to those areas. And then it will select the color in those areas. And I don't think it, let me do that real quick again. So I didn't have the image flattened. So we'll do that again. So I did that. I selected this. I controlled it. The slider's still in the same place. So anyway, it'll select it this time. You'll see it. So that's kind of the orange that it's going to affect. And again, this is color selection. I can go in here. I can use either the balance or the mixer. And I think I'm going to use the balance. And I'm going to go to more of a kind of a red color on this. You see that? So I can increase the red, you know, and it starts to change. But notice the control and the color is, it's very feathered, but it's natural, and it's aligned with the colors that came out of the photo itself. So I'm not modifying the picture, I'm just balancing the colors. That's all I'm doing here. And this is because I had an imbalance in color based on the number of frames that I had for each channel. So here again, these are sliders. You can play around and adjust it, you know, kind of to that, right? So I get that. I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool. That looks better. And then, but I noticed I didn't extend my my changes up into here, so I can do that. You know, I can go up and try to blend that in and increase the orange in this a little bit more by doing the same thing. So we'll flatten the image here, and I'll just show you real quick how that works. So let's say you miss something in the image, and you're like, oh, either you can back up and you can slide that little slider in the fuzziness for that the color selector tool, or you can just come in and do it again and extend it. So this time I'm going to use the color range tool again, and I'm going to select this kind of highlighted border here. This is what I want to select in right here. And notice the image or the part of the image that's going to be affected by the change. So I'm going to back this down a little bit. I got more, and this is going to modify on top of the previous modification that I did. So it's going to intensify the changes that I made already, but then it's going to blend in and change the color in the area that I didn't modify yet. So we'll do that, and a much larger area is affected. Probably a little bit too much there. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to do that same thing with the color balance. And so this guy I brought into the yellow a little bit more, and then I increased that red to give it kind of the more orange intense look. Okay, so you can see how that works. And now we brought this area, you know, we increased the color there to kind of match the color here. And of course it wasn't perfect, but again, this is just a quick tutorial. So that's kind of neat. One of the things I also want to show you while we're in here already is obviously we have a little too much blue in some of these areas here. I can change that with the color select as well, but I can also use the magic wand. So if I use the magic wand and I come in here, and we'll leave this zoomed out, I can pick a number here, and by using the different numbers, it'll just select the area close by that, you know, the smaller the number, the smaller area, or smaller the area there. If I go to 101, of course, it's probably going to select everything, or a large portion of it. If I select, so I'm going to deselect this, and I'm going to go something in between. I'm going to go to like 31, and we'll see what this does. Okay, so this is highlighting the dark areas. So I've got, you know, different areas. See, I want to, you know, get rid of some of that blue and the black area out here. I can continue to select this. Okay, and of course that's way too much. I can back up by hitting Control Z. escape. Control Z gets me back to my original selection. I can reduce the number if I want, and I can kind of control areas of the picture that I want to modify. And so on this one, I just want to make it a little more contrasty. I can do that by going to the select and mask. And this is pretty cool. So there you can see what I selected. And if you a lot of problems is people don't feather or mask in the right way, and you'll get these sharp, hard transitions in your editing. So that's what the feather is. So just slide your feather out. And again, I'm not doing this to make this perfect. I'm just showing you how this works. So I feathered out the transition, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to reduce the blue in these dark areas, and so I'm going to select the blue channel. Okay, and I'm going to bring the slider over, and I'm trying to get a little bit more black, a little bit more contrast. Do you see how that worked? Okay, so not too much, just enough to get the blue. Okay, and you noticed I probably should have maybe feathered a little bit more. Notice I'm kind of cloudy looking here, kind of opaque, but up here I've got some nice transitions. But that's kind of how that works. You can do that way just to get rid of some of that blue. We'll leave it right there. And we'll flatten that. And then you notice I still have some really red stars out here, but that's okay. I'm just going to leave it that way right now. So right now we're getting closer. I'm going to do a couple more little adjustments here with the color select tool. And on this one, I think we're going to go a little bit more blue where it's kind of a greenish color. So we'll zoom in here. We'll say, okay, I'm really green. I got some decent turquoise blue down here, but this is a little more green than I wanted. So I'm going to select this area. We'll just select like this right here. And I'm going to control the extent to which I want this change done. And I'm going to really keep it centralized to the blue area in the center of the nebula, right about there. Actually, I'm a little bit low, so let's go up here, and you can see that move. So if I'm down here, watch this guy right here as I'm selecting. So if I select up through the image, it selects different areas. So I like to select, let's see, let's try that. That's most of the blue. If I go over here, it's going to, I'm just looking around here to see where I want to control this. I think this is pretty good right here. We'll try this. Alright, so that's right about in the blue area that I want to try and control, and notice it kept out of the top of the pillars there, so that's good. So with this, I'll show you what the mask looks like. It's a good reference again. So if I back up, I don't think I can back up in here while I'm in the mask, but anyway, that's the area that's selected. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to back up, and I'm going to do a channel mix. And I don't want to stretch, because stretch removes data. I'm balancing and mixing. Maybe I'll use the balance again because of the imbalance between the channels. So I'm going to increase the blue slightly. Look, I can do it like that. You can see how it comes in and goes out, right? And so I'm just going to increase it slightly to more of a blue, and then I can increase my, I can increase the red too. I can play with that, and I can do the cyan here, if I want to do that as well. I'm going to kind of leave it, I don't know, something like that. You really got to be careful how you do this. Notice I got the green out, and it's a little more blue, but it's not too much. I didn't get over aggressive on it. I could actually even get away from the green a little more, right, and maybe decrease the blue a little bit. Again, we're adjusting a little bit at a time. You want to get away from that purpley look. So we've got a little too much blue in there, and then maybe a little too much red too. So just play around with it. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. I think that's almost pretty close to where I was. There's a little green. If I hold it down, you can see it was pretty green. I just increased it slightly. So we're getting closer there. And then if I want to really get aggressive and do like a whole stretch on the image, I can play around with that too. I can go to this where it's hue and saturation. And these are like quick editing tools too. I can kind of bring it over here to more of a greenish look. I can bring it over here to more of a blue look, and it kind of takes the whole image and balances out together. And then you can find the point at which you want to keep it, and then you can increase the saturation if you want to do that. But this is where things get out. People can get out of control. So I think the trick is to really be careful about how you how you do your selections and changes. So if I go back, I like it more the way it was. So I just hit this back. This reverts back to the for that particular layer, and the changes that you made, it just reverts back to the original. So that's we could do contrast, brightness, contrast. I'm trying to think if there's any other particular tools I want to show you. The mixer we didn't really do too much of. Here you can mix channels. You can reduce your green right there. So we were pretty green, right? So we can reduce that. So that kind of looks cool. And then we can flatten this, layer flatten, and then we can increase the orange here. So we can saturate the orange. If I want to do that, I'll hit this color select again, and we'll hit the heavy orange right there that's along the borders and so forth, and we can increase that by doing a saturation on that. And again, we can and we can also bring a lighten. We can lighten it and kind of whoops, that was way too much. So we don't want to play with that. See, that's where you can get out of control, right? So we got to be careful there. And let's see. One thing I can do to fix this is, and this is a good point to do it. So notice how this area looks a little dead, right? So this is where now I'm working with the channel. So we'll flatten this, and this is where we start layering. So we have kind of an image. It looks a little dead. So some of these highlights that are in here aren't really the highlights that I want to have, right? And so in your hydrogen channel, you notice it's this, bam, it's overexposed and everything. So we'll probably, as a luminosity layer, that's what we're going to do here. We'll go back to our luminosity channel or a hydrogen channel, and we'll stretch this to a level that looks kind of presentable. And you can increase the gamma here if you want. You can do whatever you want, but you really want to balance out this image or this particular frame to a point where you want your highlights in your other image. And you can play around with this and then just copy that as you can copy that to the clipboard. Then you come back to your image that you're working on, and you can literally paste it, Control V, okay? And let me back up a minute because I don't think I did something here. We'll go ahead and make sure that this is, let's say we got it out of here. This didn't flatten for whatever reason. Whoops. We'll go ahead and get this flattened, and then we'll do the Control A, Control C. So copy to the clipboard. Now we'll paste it in here. And okay, so now you can see I have a layer and I have the background. If I turn the layer off, you can see the background still there. Now what you do is you go to your layers here and then down to normal here, and you'll get a drop down for different types of layers, and each one of these does a little bit different thing. So you can do the darken, multiply, whatever, and you can see what these different channels do. So that looks kind of cool, but it's got too much gamma in it. I really like the colors there. Or I can go down to the luminosity. So that's kind of cool too, right? And we'll go back up to this one. I kind of like that, but there's too much gamma in it. It blows up the stars. So you can play around and you can see which one works the best, but we'll just do the luminosity layer. And notice how it kind of lightened that up. So if I turn the layer off, see how it's dead? That's what the luminosity layer did. It almost looks like you lit up a flashlight behind the layer. That's the trick. That's where your luminosity, and it'll also increase the definition in some of the areas in your nebula, you know, like the wisps up there on the top. If I turn that back on, you know, you can start to see things. You'll see contrast and so forth. So that's pretty cool. You can, again, you can play with the layers and the different ones in your drop down here, depending on you know, what suits you and what part of the processing you're in. But that layering part is probably one of the most important parts of putting a color image together because of your limitations without the layer to the RBG or the RGB channels. Again, this is just the, or this is without it. Your RGB channels will look kind of dead like that, and then once you put that luminosity layer on top of it, you can light it up. Now, your layer, you can also increase or decrease the amount of the layer that you apply by sliding this. Okay, so that's the layer not in there, and then as I increase the layer and the impact that it has, you know, I can move it to 100%. Now, one of the things I was looking at here was I was looking at one of these images like this guy here, where I had this really intense transition. I think it was that one. Let's see, yeah. It had a lot of the gamma in it. This guy. Now, if I selected that as a layer, I could decrease that, and I was wondering if it would. I was wondering if it would bring into something, you know, that was better than the luminosity, but it doesn't. Luminosity was the best, so I'll keep it there. And anyway, so that's that. That's the luminosity layer. We'll flatten this. Okay. We can even do another layer if I wanted to. We could actually go like this. We could do the contrast on this guy. Also, when you do a luminosity layer, sometimes you can remove the noise in the picture doing that. Right now, what I wanted to see is I wanted to see if I could reduce my I wanted to reduce the exposure slightly there by stretching it and limiting the exposure, and then you know, you can actually do this, and then you can throw in the hydrogen alpha layer on top of that, and you can actually apply this. Make sure I flatten this real quick. Okay, and I can put the luminosity layer on that, or a layer on top, and then I can see, okay, what did that do, right? And I can go through these, and I can go back to the luminosity layer and you know, kind of see what that might do. And you notice the intensity of the hydrogen alpha, or the orange, is starting to get reduced there. And so what I might do is go back, and you can also create a frame. You know, you can like create this frame right here, and then use that as a layer to pull in on top of your you know, your other image, and you can increase the gamma and maybe some of the saturation and the orange there. I can reduce the intensity of that, and I can make it kind of pop out more, and I can save that as an image as well. And then if I wanted to zoom into this, you know, maybe if you wanted to increase your or crop your image to closer in, maybe that stretch or that luminosity layer was you know, something that worked. Where out here obviously it got really black, but maybe your interesting part of the photo is right there. Anyway, we're going to back out of this. We're going to get back to that other image with the luminosity. I think it was this one right here. And let's see, we'll back out one more time. Yeah, so that's with the layer on. This is with the layer off. Okay, so we start out with that. We got to that. And the last thing I'm going to do, we're at 56 minutes here, is we'll just, again, this is far from what I would do, but you can see it gets closer and closer with those different selections and masking and stuff like that. So that's the whole point. We're going to play around with an adjustment here. We'll just do we'll do a saturation real quick. Increase the colors. You know, I mean, you can get out of control here really easy. And then we can do, you know, we can do a contrast adjustment if we want, and we can increase the darks that way, so it's kind of pops out more, right? And that's about it. So, you know, that's playing around with Photoshop and some of the basic tools. I can also the last thing I want to show you real quick is Lightroom. So I'm going to save this image now. Say this is image you've been working on, and you're you know, you're at your wit's end using Photoshop because you're not really sure, you know, what all the tools do, how, you know, you're lost in your image, or you got it to a point where you're like, okay, look, I'm done with this thing. Well, go ahead and pull that into Lightroom, and because there's some cool things in Lightroom that you could play around with to actually make it even a little bit better. So we'll save this as, and we'll do we'll just save this as a JPEG image in the test folder that I have here. So I'm going to hit JPEG, and as you can see, I've been playing around with this, and I'm just going to call it working 2. And I'm going to save that, and I'm going to go into Lightroom here, and I'm going to add a photo. This is another experiment right here that you see on the screen. But I'm going to add the photo, and I'm going to go to that picture that I just saved out of Photoshop, and it was working 2. So we'll bring that into Lightroom. Drop this guy down here. Okay, so here it is. And this is really nice because what you can do is you can reduce things right out of the box. Now again, I didn't work on the stars, so I've got a lot of red stars in here, but we could actually you know, reduce the red here, but it's going to take away from other things. So if I want to reduce the red slightly, notice that the some of that red, I think it's catching up here. It may be magenta. So there's real intense magenta around the stars and everything, but if I reduce that, I can, you know, I can get rid of some of that here. I've also noticed that I've got kind of a purple hue around some of the stars and some of the image. And the other thing is, you know, so you have these sliders, so they really, you know, it's a quick way to do editing, right? So my orange, right? So I've got orange over here. I can increase that. You know, so it really brings in the orange if I want. You know, I can go off the scale there. Or I can do that. I can increase the blue, you know, or I can decrease the blue and make it look a little more natural. You know, so that's kind of cool, right? And then I can do things like, you know, the highlights and the whites, like up in the top and the wisps and things like that. I can do that. I can also use these these are like selection tools, right? So if I want to use these selection tools in Lightroom, I can literally like go into the image here, and we'll zoom in, and I'll pick like 66%, right? And notice the top of the pillars right here. I can go into that, and I can select my this little brush tool, and I could use my roller here, and you can see it decreases or increases the size. And notice I've got all these things and nothing has happened yet, right? So this tool, I'm going to decrease the size of it, and this is going, and then I'm going to put it on the image, right? Okay, so like that, and I'm going to press down, and then I'm going to move it. Okay, right there, and then I let up. Now this, you can see that little red line. You see that red line right there? That's the area that the changes are going to apply to. Okay, now if I want to delete this, I just hit delete. Okay, I didn't make any changes. I just wanted to show you the selection. So again, I'm going to select this guy again. I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to increase the size, and I'm going to select all this white, or all this area. Okay, now I'm going to show you it's a fatter selection. Okay, now I come over here and I could do something like increase the white or decrease the white. You see that? So that's kind of cool. You can, you know, you can bring out things or darken them or whatever. The other thing I can do is I can, you know, I can increase the contrast maybe in that area, which doesn't do a whole lot. Or I can, you know, play with the shadows in that area. It just depends on, you know, what you want to do, right? So that's cool. And then this one here, you have a circular selection, and you could basically do this, and then you can select a whole area of your image if you want. It's probably a little big, but, and then whatever you do with that particular tool, you start moving these sliders, and it'll limit your changes to that area. And then you have a feather here, so you can, that the setting, you can feather it. So this is feathered 100. It'll feather out your changes as well. So that's kind of cool in Lightroom. But I'm not going to use any of those right now. And then here's a rectangular one. It's the same thing, but it's this is good for like gradients and changes from like for high, you know, horizons and whatever the case may be. You have a way that you can blend out. This is a healing tool, and you can, you know, do little healing things like you can do in Photoshop. But Lightroom has tools that definitely work different, but they're to be, you know, they're really faster and a little bit more simple to use. You can do like a curve adjustment, you know, here, and then down in the bottom you have some good noise reduction and clarity. And so I'm going to zoom back out of this image, and here we have a dehaze. This is really nice for like land-based photography. A slight dehaze on pictures, just bam, it just makes them pop instantly. For astrophotography, it's not a real good thing to use because you'll increase the noise in the picture. And all of these actually, sharpening, dehaze, clarity, and texture will increase the noise in the picture, so be careful with those. But a dehaze looks like this. Basically, it'll increase the blacks, and it'll get rid of that kind of smoky look, so it'll really make things pop out. And then, you know, that's the opposite effect, right? So that's what dehaze does, right? It makes that thing pop out more, which is kind of cool. So I'll leave that. I'll do like a slight dehaze on it, which is kind of nice. And then the clarity, I don't really like clarity. It kind of makes things look fake. You know, so I mean, you can go like ultra clear on it, right? So again, these are cool things in Lightroom. It just seems to work good for certain editing. If you notice, I have like these blue transitions. If I was in Photoshop, I would have fixed that, but I didn't, and it's still here. The other thing I want to show you is color noise. So we'll zoom in here, and notice first of all that I have a lot of noise in the picture anyway when I'm zoomed in. So Lightroom is a good place to get rid of the noise, so I can do a slight adjustment to the to get rid of the noise. I can also do, you know, if we go into these stars, right, and we got that color issue, I can do a color noise reduction, so it'll help get rid of. I mean, color noise reduction does a real slight adjustment. You really gotta play around with it to see where it helps you, but it's there if you want to use it. Typically, if you got a lot of colors and you have pixels that are right next to each other that are different colors, you'll see a transition in the pixels, and by doing the color noise reduction, it'll spread that transition out a little bit, you know, over a few more pixels, and then it won't be such a pronounced transition. So again, basic editing, definitely not the best image or result. This all starts out in the beginning, right? So when you shoot the image, we'll make this fit here. When you shoot the image originally, that's where everything starts. So depending on the time of the year, your focus, your tracking, the number of frames you take, the darks, you know, you really got to spend a lot of time to nail that down, because ultimately you're going to be in here stacking that stuff and then combining it into your color image. And what you're going to think about is, oh, why didn't I, you know, take more sulfur shots so that I could, you know, balance out the stars, and in particular high quality sulfur shots. So good, you know, you want to take maybe sulfur when the image is a little bit higher in the sky, so you're not shooting through the atmosphere and out of focus. Guiding and you know, everything's affected by your seeing conditions, so your guiding can be reduced. Your focus, trying to find your focus, and the auto-focusing tools and things like that don't work as well when you're fighting the atmosphere, and you'll hunt around. So you know, all that goes into the end product. Your patience, you know, spend a lot of time on that focus, really. If I could stress anything, it would be that. Your scope, if it's a decent quality scope, your focus, you know, can be pretty good, especially if it's a good quality APO. You would be surprised at how well you can actually focus that, and how just slight differences in focus can make a real big difference when you're zoomed in at high power or a longer focal length, like we are here. The Celestron Edge, for me, I'm still learning to master it, and having a lot of fun. The off-axis guider and the guiding camera, I really had to spend a lot of time matching those, as I discussed in part two. But all that goes into this, and then, you know, so that's the equipment side of it. Then it's just learning how to use Photoshop and what works best for you. Deep Sky Stacker is pretty straightforward. That's, you know, basically you take your images in there, you stack them, you might do a small adjustment, make sure you get your reference frame correct, and make sure you, again, you know, scan your images and pull out the quality images out of there. So that's it for part 3 out of this 3 video sequence. I can get stuck in here and go on and on, but I'm not going to do that. I hope you appreciate some of this. We'll leave this as for this year. Hopefully next year we'll get some better images, and we could you know, pull in that stuff like I was talking about with better quality. But anyway, that's it, and we'll see you in the next video, whatever it may be, when I put it out. And that's all I got. Best of luck, clear skies, and we'll see you later.